Okay, hello everyone, welcome back to GMMUN batch 9.0.
In the Model United Nations School. So we will talk about, this time we will talk about position paper. So a brief introduction first, for those of you who have joined for today's session. The first class talks about Model United Nations in general. We talk about the procedures, we talk about the flows of MUN, but right now we will focus specifically on one of the documents that you are going to make in MUN, which is called as position paper. Okay, and I will start sharing my screen now. Okay, so for today, we will talk about position paper in general, and also I will show you an example of position paper in MUN, and you can use it as a reference for you to make position papers in the future. But before I start, let me begin with the fact that position paper is one of the most crucial documents in MUN, apart from the other documents. Why? Because when you make a position paper, you are generally making a detailed timeline, a detailed description of your country's perspective towards a certain issue. So it's very important for you to make a position paper that is comprehensive as well as complete from the very first to the very end. Everything that you feel you need to talk, that you need other countries to know, you're going to have to put it in the position paper, but as compact as possible. Okay, as detailed as possible, and at the same time make sure for your position paper not to exceed the minimum or the maximum page of your position paper. Okay, so if the minimum is 2 pages, then you're gonna have to make minimum two. You cannot make only 1 page of position paper, and vice versa. If the maximum is 2 pages, then make sure your position paper does not exceed that 2 page requirement. Okay. Okay, so I will tell you the answers of these two questions. So the first one is, what is position paper? And secondly is, why do we need to write position paper? Okay. So for position paper, it is one of the three documents in MUN. The other two we will talk later, but this time we'll focus on position paper. In general, position paper is a paper that you have to make before you start your conference, in which you talk about your country's perspective, your country's general point of view on a certain topic. Okay. So since this is general, since this is just an overview over your perspective of a country on a certain issue, it does not mean that it has to be that detailed, right? Since it's general. Okay. And the reason why you have to write your position paper is because it will help you in researching more about your country as well as more about your council. Okay. And the reason why you have to make position paper is because you're gonna be very, very helped by that position paper in terms of getting to know what things to write. Okay. So I know it's kind of abstract since we and also you probably haven't seen the example of position paper, but after this, I will show you an example of position paper. But what you have to know first about position paper is that this is submitted before the conference starts, not during the conference or after the conference. Okay, so it is submitted before the conference starts. Because it is submitted before the conference, you have to make and conduct a research way before your position paper is submitted. Okay, so there has to be a research. There has to be an in-depth research about your country's position on a certain topic. Okay, the second thing. The second thing is that not only that it is submitted by the conference, position paper also summarizes your country's policy. So I did mention earlier that it's all about your country's perspective, but perspective itself is not how you feel your country is feeling towards a certain topic. No, what I meant by perspective is a concrete perspective, an actual perspective that is crystallized in a form of policy, in a form of real policy. I will use an example of Indonesia. Indonesia is currently facing perhaps one of the most stressful periods of COVID-19 pandemic in which the variants of COVID-19 are emerging from anywhere. We have variants from the UK, we have variant from the India, and all other kinds of variants that I don't even understand. There's so much and so many forms of variants of COVID-19 right now, especially here in the capital city of Jakarta. And since that situation is not something that we can predict, it's not something that we can imagine earlier, we have to make a policy. We have to set out a form of policy that can combat and perhaps reduce the rise of COVID-19 rates, right? And that policy is actually sometimes named using certain terms. For example, in Indonesia, right now we are using PPKM, right? Or what a term that stands for restriction of society's activities, basically restriction of society's activities, right? So this PPKM policy, right, in Indonesia right now, it is what we call as policy. It is a real solution that is currently used by the government to combat a certain issue, which is COVID-19 for this case. So policy is not always the name of the regulation. It's not always the name of the law, right? It's not just we try to specify a certain number of law in a certain number of year. It's not just about that. Policy can also be in a form of everyday activities that are currently being done by the government. But of course, every kind of policy is always based on the law. It's based on the regulation. So you can always refer to law and regulation, right? But what you have to do is not to retype the law or the document of the regulation, but what you have to do is to summarize the policy, right? Summarize the policy, making sure that it actually reflects the idea or the solution that you wish to impact or you wish to affect on the current issue. Okay. So have that mindset first in your current perspective right now about position paper. Okay, before I move on, any kind of question that you wish to ask, any type of question. Is there any question? You can use your Zoom chat feature box. You can unmute yourself. If you have any question, then feel free to ask me a question so that I know if you guys understand the material. Okay, I cannot know if you guys understand or not if you don't ask. Okay, and while we're waiting for the question, I would like to express my gratitude. I would like to say thank you for those of you who have submitted your homework, and I really appreciate the gesture. And I have reviewed some of the homeworks, and some of them are really really well done, really really well finished. And I really believe that you guys can continue in understanding the further materials, right? And for those of you who have not made your homework, you can make it later. It's up to you when you want to submit it, as long as it's still in the duration of the MUN school. And for those of you who haven't had the time, who actually are quite occupied right now, and you cannot make it to make the homework, then it's okay, because it is not obligatory, it's not mandatory, it's not required. So you can skip your homework, and it's okay. There will be no scoring reports. We will not inform your parents that you're not doing your homework. No, we're not doing all of that. It's basically pure your initiative in learning something, and it's really up to you. Okay. Okay, since I don't see any question, I will move on to the next slide, the general rule. Okay, before I move on to this, I want to let you guys know that in position paper we actually have to make it concise, right? Even though we're trying to portray our position, even though we're trying to show the world where our position is, it has to be concise. It has to be comprehensive, yes, but it has to be concise, simple, and also easy to be understood, right? By as many countries as possible. If it is easy to understand, if it is easy to read, if countries are having an easy time to understand the whole paper, then you have made a good position paper. Okay, and that's a good mark. But in general rules, the position paper in MUN actually only has two-page paper maximum. Sometimes it's one and a half, sometimes even it's only one page, but it excludes the reference, right? The reference is actually not part of the a requirement of the minimum page. However, you have to again ask and verify to the committee whether that actually is the case, because sometimes there are several MUN conferences that include the references as a part of the minimum page requirement or the maximum page requirement. So you have to ask one of the committee members and make sure that that's actually the case. Okay, so the second one, the one that is in the center, the content. We already know that it's about perspective, it's about a country's position, a country stance, but in general, we are talking about the national stance of a country, right? Again, I'm going to use an example of Indonesia. Indonesia for the country and COVID-19 for the topic. Let's say Indonesia wants to make a position paper regarding COVID-19, especially the Delta variant in the month of August 2021, for example, today. Well, not today, tomorrow. Tomorrow is August 1st. For the case of August, Indonesia has to consider the recent cases of COVID-19, especially in big cities in Indonesia, right? And apart from that, they also need to consider about the bed occupancy rate, the BOR, right? The BOR. And after they consider the rate of the COVID-19 cases, after they consider about the bed occupancy rate, they also have to consider whether our national budget actually supports our COVID-19 programs, right? And all of that, you have to put it in a form of position paper, right? However, what you need to know is that we're not talking about the Jakarta government's perspective on the COVID-19. And also, we're not talking about the Surabaya city government policy on the COVID-19 case. And also, we're not talking about the province of West Java policy on the COVID-19 case. In a position paper, you have to take a helicopter view, right, in terms of a national policy that is used in Indonesia. Since Indonesia is not a federal country, and knowing that Indonesia is a republic, that what we need to refer to as a national stance is the national or the central government's policy. In this case, president, the vice president, and also the ministers, right? These are the executive branches of the government, right? And as you guys have understood, the government is generally divided into three in most countries. We have the executive branch, we have the legislative branch, and we also have the juridical branch, the third one. Executive branch is the one that works the programs. The legislative branch actually is the one that funds the programs, that gives the money, that finds the money, allocates the money. And the juridical branch is the one that settles the dispute if there's any dispute arising during the implementation of the program, right? The Supreme Court, the Constitutional Court, or the district courts, or in Indonesia we call it as pengadilan, right? Or mahkamah. These are the juridical branches. They are the ones that decide if a dispute arises, right? But executive and legislative, they're also different. Legislative is the one that funds, executive is the one that runs the programs. So if we're talking about this one that I'm referring to, the national stance, we have to refer to the executive branch, okay? Refer to the executive branch policy, okay? But only refer to the policies that are currently active, right? Only refer to the policies made by the executive branch of the government that are currently active and currently ongoing. If we're talking about COVID-19, then we have to refer to the policy of the 2020 and the 2021 central government policy, which in this case is currently run by President Joko Widodo, right? We cannot refer to a policy that is made 50 or 60, 70 years ago when our president is still President Sukarno, right? It's two different cases. Okay, so only refer to the executive branch policy and to the active policy that is currently being used. For other countries' cases, for example, in federal countries, right, they have state, right? They have states, and also they have the federal government. For their case, they're gonna have to use the federal government, right? because federal government and states might have different interpretation of the issue. So you have to refer to the federal. The same case, kind of the same, actually applies with republic. Even though there are central government and also there are regional government, you're gonna have to refer to the central government when it comes to writing your position paper. Okay, so you already have the mindset in determining the policy of the case. The last one is this one. When and where do we have to submit our position paper? The answer is before the conference. So if the conference starts on Monday, then you have to submit it before Monday, which can be Sunday, it can be Saturday, Friday, and so on and so forth. But there are certain MUN organizers that perhaps allow the MUN participants to submit the position paper during the day of the conference, perhaps 2 hours before the conference starts or 1 hour before the conference starts. But I have never seen an MUN organizer that allows MUN participants to submit their position paper on the second day of the conference. It's kind of not possible. Okay, since the position paper is only used for consideration purposes at the beginning of the MUN conference. It will not be presented, it will not be discussed, it will not be disclosed to other MUN participants. So I don't see the purpose of submitting position paper at the second day of the conference. Okay. All right. Any questions so far? Anyone wants to ask a question? Feel free to ask the question. If anyone wants to ask a question, then feel free to do so. I will wait for several minutes. Okay. No question. Okay, I will continue to this part. So, okay, the question of why do we need to write position paper? Okay, so for those of you who have not known, MUN, even though it's a conference, at the same time, it's also a competition. So, since this is a competition, there will be winners and there will be participants, right? No losers, okay? Winners and participants. The winners, one of the achievements that the winners can win is the best position paper, right? The best position paper is an award that is dedicated for those who made the best position paper, the best of quality, right? The most comprehensive, the most on point, the most on track position paper. This award will be dedicated for those who make such position paper. Okay. So if you wish to win this award, then you have to make a position paper. You have to write a position paper. The second thing is that even though you don't expect or you don't have a target to actually win a position paper will still help your understanding in terms of interpreting your country's policy within the topic, right? Sometimes you just want to know whether your policy in your country is actually in line with other people's or other countries' perspective, right? Sometimes you see that your country's policy is the best, but once you make your position paper and then you compare your policy with other countries' policies, and then you find this big gap between each other, so you feel like you have to provide other information that can complete your policy that you think is not as good as other countries' policy. Okay, so those are the two reasons, right? The two reasons why we have to or why we need to write a position paper. It's either or both for eligibility of awards, and second one is to help your understanding. Okay, I hope this one is understandable. I hope it's easy to understand, because we will move on to the crucial part of the presentation. So this is the hard one, right? This is the hard one. So I want you guys to focus, since this is the hard one. This is the structure of position paper. I'm not going to explain it after I show you the example of position paper, but generally we have background, past action, country stance, and also solution. Now I will show you and share screen to all of you an example of position paper. Okay, I'm going to stop share my screen. Share screen. Wait, this one. Nah, this is an example of position paper. So again, bear in mind that this is a paper that is made individually by a country. Okay, one country, one position paper. There is no one position paper for two countries at the same time. Okay, so only make this by yourself. Don't invite other countries to, draft the position paper together. This is an example of position paper that is made in the Council of UN General Assembly and also made by the Republic of Austria. The topic of the conference at the time was global migration. Okay, global migration and its impact towards national security and also towards human rights. This is made by two delegates named Willis and also Mufley. And if you see that the heading of the paper is consisting of the logo, right? The coat of arms of the country of Austria, and also information related to the position paper maker, in this case, the Republic of Austria. Okay. So you have to provide information about the name of the country, okay, the name of the council, the name of the topic, as well as the name of your delegates and all, and if applicable, your relevant institution or campus. After you make this heading, you can start by having an opening paragraph that generally puts all the information about the understanding of the issue. So you have not talked about your country here. You have not started to discuss issues happening in your country. You only start by generally describing the current situation of the issue. In this case, the paper talks about migration, right? The paper talks about migration and the general understanding of migration. If you see at the first paragraph, the paragraph does not talk about a specific country. They talk it about in a general sense. And that's what you have to do when you make your first position paper. And I know, also that you notice that there's a quote, right, on top of the first paragraph. Some of you might ask, Ka or sir, why do we insert this? Why do we put a quote in a position paper? What's the function of this? The answer is that if you put a quote, right, basically a quote from a leader in your country that corresponds to the issue, it will generally grasp the attention of the chairs, right? Still remember the chairs, right? The chairs are the juries, the judges of the competition. When you grasp their attention, right, then your paper will stand out, right? Your paper will be different with other countries' papers, which makes your position paper better. When your position paper is better than other countries' papers, then there is a possibility for you to win the best position paper. And that is the function of putting a quote on top of the first paragraph. Okay. I'm not gonna say it's required because you don't have to do this, but it helps you, right? It helps you in gaining more possibilities of getting recognized by the cheers. Okay. So find a quote from your relevant leader in your country, right? That corresponds to the issue. So don't put any kind of quotes. No, only put a quote that actually reflects the issue that is currently being discussed. Okay. So this is the first one. We've talked about this. Second one is, if the first one talks about the topic background, the second one talks about the United Nations past action. Okay, why United Nations? Because the council that we're participating is United Nations. And the second answer is because it is model United Nations, not model Dewan Perwakilan Rakyat, right? It's not other model, right? It's model United Nations. So it has to be about the UN's perspective. And also, your country is a member of the United Nations. So you have to insert your perspective on the United Nations perspective apart from your own country's perspective on the issue. Okay. So those are two different things. And you have to put it on your paper. So feel free to craft the ideas, feel free to write, feel free to, you know, make sure that the paper is compiled using the most relevant information that you can find on the internet or other sources of information, and make sure that it's comprehensive from top to bottom. Make sure it's coherent from one paragraph to another. So it will help you in understanding the whole issue. And this paper will be a reflection of how good your research is. Okay. If you research well, if you make and conduct a very good research, then the paper will correspond to that kind of quality. It will also get better. So if you want to make a good position paper, you have to research first. I mean, look at the numbers. You see 5 million in Europe, 11 million in the United States, 258 million international migrants. You will not know all of these numbers if you don't research, right? It's not just that the numbers are coming up naturally in your head. You have to research about it. Maybe to talk about general stuff like the meaning of migration or the causes of migration, perhaps you can do that by yourself without researching, and that's okay. But when it comes to crucial information, when it comes to information that reflect the quality of your paper, that reflect the accountability of your paper, then you have to research to reliable sources of information. It can be in a form of research institution reports, or it can be in a form of news reports, or perhaps it's even an annual report from a certain government. Those are the sources that are reliable, and you can put all of those information on your position paper. Okay, so only use reliable sources of information, because if you're not using a reliable sources, for example, you're using a TikTok video as a reference to the position paper, or using someone's Facebook status update on your position paper, it's not just gonna happen. Okay, it's not gonna be reliable. Okay, so don't use that. Only use reliable sources of information. Okay. Third paragraph is now talking about the country. If you see that this one talks about the United States, you can read it by yourself. The first one is talking about the migration in general. The third thing is Austria policy on the issue. Since the country that making the position paper is Austria itself. So the third paragraph has to be Austria. What are the information that you have to put on this third paragraph? You have to put information about Austria's policy. In this case, the writers use the Asylum Act of 1991. They also use 1945 until 1973 experiences of Austria in mitigating the issue. You can use all of this information, and also always remember to put the reliable sources. Okay. After the all three paragraphs, right? After all of these three paragraphs, you move on to the solution part, right? The solution is the answer towards the problem. If the problem is, for example, it's hard to get people vaccinated, right? It's hard to reach a certain target of vaccination success rates because certain reasons are happening, or any kind of reason. What do we have to do to make and get more people vaccinated? What do we have to do to increase vaccination success rate? The answer to that question is the solution of your position paper. If you are discussing about migration, then what are the solutions to make sure that migration does not impose problems to countries, right? The answer of all of that, you put it in a form of a comprehensive solution, like this one. In this case, the country of Austria is dividing the solution into three phases: phase one, phase two, and also phase three. It's not the Marvel Cinematic Universe, no, but this phases, right? It's what we call a solution. The first one is that Austria wants to establish the international data collection for emergency, or emergency migrant, or IDEM. Second phase is they want to establish the international temporary entry permission, or ITEM. Last thing is that they want to establish the safe deportation of immigrant standard. Now, what you need to know is that you can make any solution that you want, right? You can make, and also you can form any kind of solution, whether the solution already happened before or you want to make a whole new solution. It's entirely okay, right? It's entirely okay. But make sure you provide the description of the solution. So you don't put a one-liner sentence in a form of solution. How do we solve COVID? Oh, we have to get people vaccinated. And that's it. That's not enough for our position paper. You have to provide a full description of the solution. we wish, or the case, the solution of combating COVID-19 is by getting as many people vaccinated, right? As many people as possible to be vaccinated. How do we start the vaccination? We have to start the vaccination from the elderly, or we have to start the vaccination from the biggest cities of a certain country. That's what we call a solution. And explain that. Why do we start with elderlies? Why do we start with big cities? Right? You provide all of that information. Oh, because vaccinations or COVID-19 cases mostly occur in big cities, so that we have to start in big cities. Provide all of the information, as many information as you want, as long as it fits the maximum page of the position paper. Okay, so it's very important for you to provide a full description of the solution. Okay, bear in mind for that one. This is really important. Trust me, this is really important, because if you want to make a position paper, at least provide a full information. Okay, don't put only one sentence information or two sentence information. Make sure it's enough, make sure it's adequate, but at the same time focus on the purpose of the issue. Okay, okay, I see a question from Khan. Can we refer to other countries' policy that we think is great? The answer is yes. The answer is yes. However, I would suggest for you to refer to your country's policy, right? And then cooperate with other countries, or put that solution with other countries' solution. You combine that, and then you provide that as a solution. That will be better, right? So remember, again, in MUN is politics, right? We want to make our country as the best one, right? We want to show to the whole world that what we're doing here is great, and that's exactly what you do in MUN. But sir, my country is not great. My country is not the best at combating COVID. I mean, we're the worst country when it comes to combating COVID. Okay, that's okay. If your country is the worst, the same answer still remains. You have to put your country's solution first. But if you know that certain solution is not going to be, is not going to be impressive in front of other countries, then you have to find any kind of solution that you think is successful, right? Any kind of solution that is successfully implemented in your country, and then you make that and you use that as your main weapon in position paper, right? So this is the solution that we're trying to propose to all of you, right? This is what's happening in my country. The success is this percent. The rate of the COVID-19 cases have drowned, and this is because of our solution. Make sure you use that, right? Make sure you use that, because this is MUN, right? You have to use your information from your country. Okay. But sir, do we have to refer to other people's countries? You can refer to other people's countries when the debate has started, right? When the moderated caucus has started. You still remember, right? The moderated caucus, or when the unmoderated caucus has happened or has begun to start. Okay. That's the key differences of position paper, and also in general debate in a general context. Okay. So that will be all. Okay, full information. Okay, it's 15 minutes left, guys. So I've talked a lot, right? Okay, I'm gonna give you guys some time. Any kind of question that you wish to ask before I move on to the next material, since we're heading to the remaining last times. Any kind of question?
Mr. Abdur, I have a question.
Sure, Safira. Thank you.
So, can a position paper can made by more than one person? Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Phil. Okay, so can one position paper be made by more than one person? The answer is no. If the case is the council is participated by one country, one person, right? Because there are some councils that are participated by two persons at the same time. It is what we call as double delegation council. So one country will be represented by two persons. For that case, one position paper for that one country can be made by two persons at the same time, and that's okay. But if you are participating in an MUN where one country is represented by one person only, then you can only rely to yourself. There's only one person that can make the position paper of this country, which is yourself. You cannot hire other people to write your position paper. But can you ask other people? Perhaps you want to ask your seniors, or you want to ask your lecturers, your teachers. The answer is yes. You can ask anyone. You can research everywhere. But make sure that the one who's writing the position paper is yourself. Why am I saying this? Because if you make a good, very good position paper, but once you have a speech, once you make your speech, the quality of your speech is not the same with the quality of your paper. And then the chair will get kind of sus with you, right? And you don't want that to happen. So if the country is represented by one person only, make sure that the one that makes the position paper is that one person and not the other person. Okay. Safira, I hope it answers your question. And anyone wants to ask a question? Okay, this one from Muji. From Kim's question, should we mention country that we refer? The answer is yes. The answer is yes. You have to refer to other countries if you are referring to that country. Okay, so don't claim other countries' solution as yours. That's just a big no-no. Okay, only refer to solutions that are actually from other countries. If you are referring to Canada's solution, for example, then you have to refer to Canada, saying that this is from Canada, and we believe that this is a good solution, and we believe that this can be implemented by all countries. Okay, that's the answer. I hope it answers the question. Any kind of question? If you guys want to ask a question, you can use the Zoom chat picture box. But okay, guys, sorry. Since we're heading to our remaining times, I'm gonna move on to the presentation again. Okay, I'm gonna just continue, but still, if you have any questions, just feel free to ask me in the Zoom chat box. Okay, this is a good position paper. So in GMMUN, in Global Millennial MUN, we will not encourage you to only make a position paper. We are encouraging you to make a good position paper. So you have to make a good position paper by sticking to the three aspects of a good position paper. The first one is on track, right? It means that you follow the procedure. If the requirement says that the maximum page is 2, then you can only have 2 pages maximum. If the organizer says that the maximum page is 1, then you have to make only 1 position paper, 1 page position paper. Second, it has to be comprehensive. It has to provide the background. It has to provide the national policy. It has to provide past actions. It has to provide solution. All of these 4 aspects have to be in a good position paper. Third one is it has to be precise. It has to provide clear mechanism, clear description of the whole issue that is currently going on, right? Provide the argument, provide the evidence in your solution to make your position paper accountable. Okay. Okay, a question coming from Kanagan. Is there a standard layout for our position paper? The answer is no, because you can make any kind of standard of layout, but there's actually a general requirement that is practically used by every participant in MUN, which almost is the same with the one that I have just shared in the previous shared screen. So you can refer to that as the standard layout, right? Use paragraphs. We rarely use tables. We rarely use charts. So only use paragraphs in a form of footnotes or bibliography at the last page of the position paper. You have to ask the organizer whether they want us to have a footnotes or whether they want to have the bibliography at the end. So footnotes are the information, the references that are used directly at the bottom of the page, right? But references or bibliography are the ones that are put at the last page of the position paper. So the references are only cited, right? They're not going to be described at the bottom of the page, but they will be put at the back of the page, right? You can refer to the example that I just reshared on the WhatsApp group. You can check on that, and then you can learn from that. If you want to see more examples of other types of position paper, feel free to ask me. I can share my version of position paper, the one that I made during my years in MUN. I can share to that to all of you, but just let me know if you want. Okay. Okay. Any question regarding this? Any question? No. Okay. So, okay, this is the other important thing. You have to provide your country profile. But remember that country profile is not how many populations are there in your country, or how many, how many mountains are there in your country, or how big is your country, form of square meters. No, it's not about country profile. Only use the country profile that is relevant to the issue. So if you're talking about migration, use country profile of your country, the profile of your country that is reflected in the issue of migration. For example, the number of people who migrate to your country, or the number of people who get deported by your country's authority, right? So those are the profile that you wish to put in your position paper. Second one is status. Status is status quo, right? Status quo means the current situation right now, what's going on, what's happening, what's currently happening in your country. That's what you're describing in your position paper. Background can use the past example. So if you want to refer to the pandemic, you can use perhaps the history, the short, brief history of the first pandemic, but make sure that the portion of that does not beat the portion of the current situation. So if you're talking about COVID-19, make sure that it talks about COVID-19 in general, right? It can talk about other pandemics as a comparison, but make sure that that portion is not as big as the one that is the main problem, which is the COVID-19. Okay. The third one is this one, past action. This is what the United Nations has done earlier. Is it going effective? Did it go well? Do we have to stick to that solution again, or do we have to make a new solution again? Those are the function of past action. Okay. If you think that past actions are not going effective, then you say on the position paper that the past action made by the United Nations is not considered effective because of A, B, and C. This is this is what forces us to make a new solution, which is called ABC. So always provide arguments, always provide reasonings. That's how you make a good position paper. Past convention. Past convention is the past international treaty. So convention means an agreement that is agreed by countries, among countries. So if we're talking about agreement between you and me, for example, as a teacher or a mentor with the students, it's not within countries, right? We're not countries, we're individuals. Convention is a treaty or an agreement, which the parties who signed to that agreement are countries, an abstract entity that encompasses a what I would call complex structure of organization, right? So Indonesia has an agreement with Malaysia, for example. This is what we call as bilateral agreement, right? For conventions and treaties, it has to take more than two countries, at least, right, to call it an international treaty. Usually, United Nations, settle the problems of global problems using international convention or international treaties. So you have to search for that. We have the United Nations Convention on the Law of the Sea. We have the United Nations Convention on the Rights of the Child. We have the Convention on Eliminating uh, Discrimination Against Women, right? CEDAW. Anyone has heard about CEDAW? That's not how we call it though. It's Convention on Elimination for Discrimination Against Women. And other types of convention against torture, right? International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights, right? Sometimes we call it convention, sometimes we call it treaty, sometimes we call it law, sometimes we call it covenant, sometimes we call it declaration. There's so many types of names to determine an international treaty. But basically, this is an agreement that is agreed by more than two countries, all right? That's the simple explanation. Okay, big stuff, right? It's kind of hard to understand, I know. But if you guys have any question, feel free to ask me. I will be more than glad to explain it again to you. Okay, so policy. Policy, basically, this is what I've just mentioned earlier. What your country is doing to combat the issue. That's it. Oh, we haven't vaccinated a lot of people. Well, what do we have to do? Oh, we're gonna vaccinate start from the workers, and then after that we can go to school students or college students, and after that we can go to the society in general. Oh, okay, that's what we call as policy. The sequences, the flows, the one that you're taking, which part that you're taking as the first part. This is what we call as policy, right? Last one is solution. In general, this is what I have mentioned earlier. This is your answer to the problem. How do you solve COVID-19? How do you solve low vaccination rates? How do you solve wars against countries? This is the solution part. And you have to be creative. You have to be, on point. It has to be creative, and at the same time, it has to be rational. So don't make a solution that is not, you know, going in line with the logics, right? Or or with the standard laws or regulation. Make sure that it's creative, but at the same time, it complies with the regulations. Okay. I hope this one's good. Okay. Yeah, this is a general part. Make sure that your position paper answers 5 W's and 1 H, right? The what, the why, the where, the when, the how, and also the who. So make sure all of these are answered, right? Oh, you want to combat vaccinate you want to combat COVID-19 using vaccination. What kind of vaccines that you will use? Why do we have to use that vaccine? Where do we have to implement that vaccination program? When will we implement the vaccination program? Is it going to be today? Is it going to be next month or next year? When do we have to implement the program? And who will run the program? Who will run the vaccination? Will the government run the vaccination, or will we delegate the authority to the private sectors or private companies? Which entity will run the vaccination program? The last one is how. How do we vaccinate the people? Do we directly vaccinate them? Do we come directly at their doors, in front of their houses, or do we ask them to come to certain offices of our ministries of health, or health departments of local government? So how do we want to implement the program? This is the answer that you have to know, and also that you have to find, and then you put it on your position paper. Okay, so that's the general comprehensive solution part of position paper. Okay. Okay, I think this is almost the end of the presentation. Any question before I start? Okay, if not, then this is just general tips. Make sure that the solution is creative, comprehensive, then enrich your data using reliable sources, right? Don't use data that comes up naturally on your head. Don't use that. Don't use imaginary data as well. Use reliable data that is scientifically tested, scientifically proven. All of that, make sure that it's included in your position paper. Okay. Okay. So you've already made a homework regarding research. Now, if you have time, you can make a position paper. Only I'm not gonna limit a maximum page or a minimum page. You can make as many papers as you want. At the same time, you can make as minimum paper as you want. It's okay. You want to make it half of the page, it's okay. But make sure all the structures are there. Make sure the background is there. Make sure the policy is there. Make sure the past action is there. Make sure the solution is there. I'm not gonna see whether it's fulfilling the minimum requirement of 2 page or 1 page. You can do that later during a real conference, but for the sake of homework, just make sure it's less than 1 page. Okay. And then for that, I will check that later. You can directly send it to me, personally chat to me, your paper in a form of Word document if possible. And then I will review it using comments and suggestions. And also, you can refer to that as your further reference in the future. Okay. So that will be all from me for today. Thank you so much for coming. And any questions so far before I end the class? No? I hope you guys understand. Okay, so since this is Saturday, right? The start of the weekend, I want you guys to maximize your weekend because this is the time for you to be happy with your family, right? To having fun. So you can do this homework perhaps later. Don't rush. Don't rush. You can do it later. You can send it next week. It's also okay. And for our next class, it will be next week too. So next week we will have our third class. Regarding the date, it's going to be either Saturday or Sunday. Regardless, we will vote on that on Thursday as usual. So you can do your homework, or you can read the presentation, or you can watch the recorded Zoom, which I will upload later after this. Okay? No question? No? Okay. So I will close by using a quote as always. You don't have to be great to start, but you have to start to be great. So in order for you to be a successful person, you don't have to be successful first, right? It's okay for you not to be successful in order for you to be successful. But if you want to be successful, you have to start it now, right? So you can start being successful. Okay, that's all from me, guys. Thank you so much for coming, and I hope you guys have a great weekend. And we will see you next week. Bye bye. Thank you, everyone.